Chapter 3. The warning bell rang just as Nancy and Daryl left Mr. Parton's office. Together, they fell into step with the crowd of kids hurrying to their homeroom classes. Out of the corner of her eye, Nancy caught Daryl looking at her, a strange little smile on his lips. "What's funny?" she asked. "Nothing." Daryl laughed softly and shook his head. "It's just that I've never met a detective, especially a beautiful redhead who drives a Mustang." Nancy laughed too. "Well, I've never met a senior who drives a Porsche." "It's my favorite toy." They rounded a corner, and Daryl casually put his hand on Nancy's shoulder to guide her out of the way of a group of kids coming in the opposite direction. "I'll have to give you a ride sometime, show you what it can do." At the touch of Daryl's hand, Nancy felt a delicious tingling sensation, and suddenly she found herself wondering what it would be like to have Daryl's arms around her. Daryl Gray was a powerfully attractive guy. "Do you think it would be good for making fast getaways?" Nancy went on in the same teasing manner. "Sure," Daryl replied, leaving his hand where it was. "But I hope you're not planning to make a getaway real soon. After all, we just met. And besides, I have a mystery to solve, remember?" "Right. And I hope it takes a long, long time." They were both laughing, looking into each other's eyes as they turned another corner and bumped into what felt to Nancy like a rock wall. "Sorry," the wall said. Nancy touched her nose to make sure it wasn't broken and then smiled at the guy, who was big and handsome and built like a truck. "Walt, meet Nancy Drew. She's a transfer student," Daryl said smoothly. "Nancy, Walt Hogan." Nancy smiled again, remembering what Bess had said about Bedford's football captain. Hunk fit him perfectly. "Yeah," Walt said, not returning her smile. "Nice to meet you." Walt strode off, and Nancy turned to Daryl. "He seemed a little angry," she commented. "Yeah, he hasn't been Mr. Friendly lately," Daryl agreed. "And you should see him in action on the field. He's like a bear just out of hibernation, mean and hungry." "I don't suppose he's a video freak by any chance?" "I thought detectives were supposed to be more subtle than that." "Why should I be subtle with you?" Nancy teased. "You're my contact, aren't you?" Daryl's hand tightened on Nancy's shoulder. "I sure am," he said softly. Nancy and Daryl were standing in front of Nancy's homeroom class, waiting for the final bell to ring. About 10 other kids were waiting too, and as Nancy laughed at Daryl's last remark, she caught a girl staring at them. The girl was blonde, pretty in a tough, hard-edged kind of way, but she didn't look too friendly, Nancy thought. She was watching Daryl intently. Then, as someone called out, "Carla!" she moved her eyes to Nancy's face for just a second before turning away. In that brief instant, she gave Nancy the strangest look. It wasn't a look of dislike, Nancy thought. It was more like a challenge. She wondered how much this Carla knew about her. The final bell rang, and Daryl gave Nancy's shoulder another squeeze. "I guess this is it for now," he said. He leaned so close that Nancy felt his breath on her ear. "You're on your own, detective." Actually, Nancy didn't expect to do much detecting on her first day. She was new in school. She had to find her way around, get used to the rhythm of the place, and meet a few people before she could start asking questions. Part of Nancy's cover was to act like a new girl, lost and a little out of it, which was easy, since that was how she felt. Daryl wasn't in any of her classes and she didn't know anyone else. Most of the kids ignored Nancy. The first really friendly girl she met was a pretty blonde with aquamarine eyes, who waylaid Nancy after English. "Hi, I'm Sarah Ames," she said. "You're new here, aren't you?" "My name's Nancy Drew, and you're right, I'm brand new." "Well, don't worry, you'll fit in fast," Sarah said. "But I wanted to get to you before anybody else did." "Oh?" Nancy wondered if Sarah might have some secret information. "I'm editor of the Bedford Sentinel," Sarah went on, "and we're desperate for people to work on the paper. I noticed in English that you can at least read and write," she joked. "And I bet you're going to be popular, so you'll have lots of good contacts. The Sentinel's fun. What do you think?" Nancy smiled to herself at the thought of her contact. She smiled at Sarah, too, for making her feel welcomed. "Thanks for asking," she said. "Let me feel my way around a little more, okay? Then I'll let you know." "Great! There's a staff meeting tonight, room 215. I hope you can make it." With a friendly wave, Sarah dashed down the hall. Nancy's next class was American history. She'd almost forgotten just how boring a bad teacher could be, but the droning voice, the intimidating looks, all of it reminded her why she'd been happy to leave high school behind. She'd certainly be happy to leave history behind. The 45-minute period dragged on and on. Halfway through, Nancy let her mind wander. Anything was better than the teacher's monotone. Purposely putting Bedford High's mystery out of her mind, Nancy thought about Sarah Ames's offer to join the newspaper staff. She was tempted to accept it. Maybe she could have a double cover, new girl and student reporter, investigating the vandal of Bedford High. It might work, she thought. But once she solved the case, she'd be leaving the school, and that would leave Sarah -1 reporter. It didn't seem fair. When American history was finally over, Nancy heaved a sigh of relief along with the rest of the students. "Class," the teacher called over the noise of the final bell. "Read the next 2 chapters in your textbook for homework." Great, Nancy groaned to herself. Boring homework, too. The Bedford High mystery was turning out to have hidden liabilities. On the way to lunch, Nancy spotted Sarah Ames at the entrance to the cafeteria and decided to tell her she wouldn't be joining the newspaper. That way, Sarah wouldn't feel hurt when Nancy didn't show up at the staff meeting. "Hi," Nancy said. "Listen, thanks for asking me to join the paper, but I think I'd better make sure my grades are in good enough shape before I do anything else, you know?" "Okay," said Sarah. "I understand. Just let me know whenever you're ready." "Thanks," said Nancy. Sarah rushed off, and Nancy entered the cafeteria. She looked around uncertainly. Where should she sit? At that moment, she heard someone call her name. Turning, she saw Connie Watson waiting in the cafeteria line. Nancy knew Connie's name because the teacher had called on her in French class. Connie's face had turned the color of a ripe tomato as she'd given her answer, and after class, Nancy had noticed that no one walked out of the room with her. Connie was slightly pudgy, but her eyes, though anxious and a little fearful, were friendly. She smiled shyly and said, "Hey, would you like to eat lunch with me?" "I wish I could," Nancy said sincerely, "but I've got to talk to the counselor about my schedule. I've been stuck with 2 gym classes. Can you believe it? I'm just going to grab a yogurt and keep going." What Nancy really wanted was a chance to snoop around the video lab, providing it was empty. If it wasn't, maybe she could ask a few innocent questions. After promising Connie that she'd sit with her the next day, Nancy paid for her yogurt, headed down the hall, turned a corner, and stopped. "Some detective you are," she told herself. "You didn't even bother to find out where the video lab is." Nancy was about ready to go back to the cafeteria and ask Connie when she saw Carla walking toward her. Nancy hadn't forgotten the challenging look Carla had given her that morning, but she put on a bright smile anyway. "Hi, this is embarrassing, but I'm lost. Could you point me in the direction of the video lab?" "Oh, it's easy to get lost in this place," Carla said with a friendly smile. "Just go to the end of this hall, turn left and follow the hall to the end. Then go through the door on your right and down the stairs. You can't miss it." "Thanks," Nancy said, just as nicely. "I appreciate it." Maybe I was just being paranoid this morning, she thought as she walked along. Nancy turned left and went down the second hall. She pushed open the door, started down the steps, and stopped. The staircase obviously wasn't going to take her to the video lab. From the look of things, it would probably lead straight to the boiler room. On the other hand, she thought, maybe Carla really is a prime pain in the you-know-what. Or maybe Carla had something to do with the anonymous videotape. That might explain why she would go out of her way to steer Nancy away from the video lab. Nancy was moving back up the stairs when she heard scuffling sounds from below. She stopped, listening, then heard a muffled shout. "Just lay off, Jake," a voice said. "I've given you what you want, so get off my back." The voice grew angrier. "You're a nobody, Webb, a real waste of space. Why don't you make like a ghost and vanish?" Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Before Nancy could move, Walt Hogan, the surly star of the football team, was beside her. He wasn't just surly, though. He was furious, his face flushed with anger. Walt shouldered Nancy roughly aside. Then his fury exploded, and he rammed his clenched fists into the door before shoving it open and storming through. While Nancy tried to decide whether to run after Walt, she heard a soft laugh. Looking down, she saw another boy, one she hadn't met before, staring up at her. "Well, if it isn't Bedford High's newest scholar, Nancy Drew," the boy sneered. "I'm Jake Webb." Jake smiled as he began climbing the stairs toward Nancy, but the look in his eyes was cold. "Do you always go around poking your nose into other people's business?" he asked. "Not too nice, Nancy Drew. Maybe I ought to explain a few rules to you. Otherwise, you won't get very far at Bedford High." Nancy recognized the voice. It was the same one she'd heard in the main hall this morning, coolly ordering some desperate kid to miss practice or else. Jake's face went with his voice, Nancy thought. Lean and bony, with a tight-lipped smile under sharp, ice-blue eyes. Nancy felt an overwhelming urge to tell the creep to buzz off. But Jake wasn't acting like the average high school egomaniac, and she was curious to see what he was up to. Jake climbed the stairs until his eyes were level with Nancy's. Still smiling, he ran one finger lazily up her arm, across her neck and to her lips. "Rule 1, Jake said softly. "Keep your mouth shut about what you just heard. If you don't, you'll never learn Rule 2. End of Chapter 3.